Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode on New Kinship, a podcast where we talk about all sorts of things that intersect the Christian faith as we engage what it means to be a Christian and have belonging, sexuality, be invested in community, have ethnic roots. And today we get a fun episode with Mike Vick from the American Solidarity Party. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
TJ, would you like to just share what brought this episode about
Yes,
and where we might be going?
yes. I'm really excited for this episode, actually. Mike, as was mentioned, is one of the leaders of the American Solidarity Party. It's basically like a Christian democratic political party that a lot of its political platform is connected to or inspired by like Catholic social teaching. So Mike can give you more on that as well. But basically that I myself have been, I guess, a supporter of the American Solidarity Party for the past, since I was in college, so a little bit over a decade maybe, and a little bit after my college time, but approximately a decade. And I'm excited. I voted for the American Solidarity Party in the past, and I'd love to see them flourish in the U.S. as a potential political option for a lot more voters. We had a connection to Mike through our friend Lucas, who's been on the podcast before. And he mentioned we should connect with Mike because he said there's interesting kind of ferment or tumult or like issues around LGBT topics in the American Solidarity Party. So that was the original connection. I'm hoping first we can have Mike introduce himself and talk a little bit more about the American Solidarity Party. And then we can get into more of this contention or issues around LGBT topics. Obviously, listeners to the podcast who've been here for a while, you know that we're coming from a side B perspective, David, Frank, and I. And so that means we think that, basically God's intention for the human person is to live kind of accord with chastity and marriage in regards to sexuality. Marriage is sort of the union that's where sex is meant to be. That also means same-sex sex is off the table for faithful Christian life. There is some contention, I think, in the movement if the society should represent that same sexual ethic, like in large. And part of that is because we come side B, the movement is incorporates different Christian traditions, right? And different Christian traditions historically have different relationships to the authorities, the magistrates, how the society should represent the ethics of the church or not.
It's funny that we've been, we're like 50, 60 plus episodes and have had so many conversations on what side B is, and we still stumble over our words sometimes in trying to succinctly explain.
Like which audience am I orienting myself towards? Because there's different audiences who need to hear different things. Yeah.
But yeah, different political theologies.
Yeah, basically. My political theology, and I'll say it before we begin, just to highlight it before Mike jumps in. I tend to think that it's better if the society represents the church's ethics on these things. For example, like marriage between a man and a woman in a lifelong covenant. But yeah, I know some people disagree with me, so we can get into that maybe later. But I'd love to first have Mike say,
how to also. I just like. When you say that, I'm like, oh, but how does that fit in with like a healthy pluralism that allows for like charity and people's whatever different traditions? Anyways, we don't have to go to that. Mike, would you, introduce yourself, and you can share as much as you want about that.
You want.
I would actually love to get into that. First off, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be in this conversation. I will note at the outset that anything I say here is me. My views are shared by some people in the party, certainly, but are not official party positions. I do hold leadership positions at the state level, at the national level, and in various unofficial groups within the party. So I just want to note that at the outset. But just to introduce myself, again, I am Mike Vick. No, not that Mike Vick. There is another Mike Vick who's more famous than I am. Someday, maybe I'll get famous enough to have a disambiguation page, and then people will be asking him whether he's me. but yeah, so I am a committed Christian, and deeply involved in political work, and have been for a long time. My father was the chair of the Democratic Party Central Committee in Del Norte
Wow.
County when I was growing up. He was union ironworker, very involved in union politics and strikes and all of that, and got involved in party politics, and later became the chair of the District 1 for the state party. And so, I was a student delegate to the 96 California State Democratic Party Convention where Bill Clinton spoke. Bill Clinton actually stayed at our hotel. They had like the top 3 floors. I'm sitting next to, an official invitation to the inauguration that my father received for the 97 inauguration, second inauguration. I had Congress people at my house when I was a kid. Politics just was sort of in my blood. My dad is not really into sports. And so politics was kind of our sport, and still is to a degree. I mean, some people treat politics like it's actually a sport, like it's like a hobby. I don't really like political hobbyism. I try to get involved. So, difference between following the team and being on the team. I like to try to get folks who are interested in politics, engaged in politics, and rather than talking about politics online, actually doing politics in their community and above that level. So that's what I've been involved in. For about 10 years, I was a journalist. So I have a poli-sci degree and a minor in journalism. I graduated from the University of San Francisco, which is a Jesuit school. I am not Catholic. I'm Protestant. I was raised mostly in Baptist churches. I attended, when I was in Indiana, a Wesleyan church. And now I attend an Assemblies of God's church, which is a Pentecostal church. But my mother was raised Catholic. Her entire side of my family is still Catholic. I graduated from Jesuit school. My first job out of college was for the Catholic San Francisco newspaper, which is the official archdiocesan newspaper. And now I'm in a party where it's based around Catholic social teaching, and the largest plurality of people are Catholics. So I seem to be ordained by God to be around Catholics my entire life, and maybe not ever become one. I don't know. When I was down in Georgia with my friend Bill Fleming, who hosts our Parties podcast, we went to an Eastern Rite Catholic church, and that was about as close as I've ever gotten to being like, I just need to join Rome. I was involved in college with Messianic Judaism, which I really love, and would probably still be going to a Messianic synagogue on Shabbat if there was one that wasn't. It was closer to me than the hour and a half away that the one that is near me now is. But so I tell people that are my Catholic friends that if Jerusalem hadn't called me first, then I might be joining with Rome. But in any event, I love Catholics. I love Catholic social teaching. My other joke is that because I was raised by left of center Democrats in a fairly conservative church, I feel like I recreated Catholic social teaching in my head without realizing it, because I took both of those things very seriously. So, I'm to the left on most issues. I'm actually to the left of most Democrats. I'm to the left of Bernie Sanders on some issues, but I'm to the right of some Republicans on social issues, on particularly on life issues. And I don't even really think of that as being conservative. It sort of sticks in my craw because I wasn't raised in a conservative household to even call that conservative. It's a human rights issue for me. But in any event, it would be deemed by most people as being very conservative. And I do hew to the traditional Christian sexual ethic. But I'm not a culture warrior. And I don't think that the culture war is particularly helpful for us as a society or in the church. And, I am not of the view that we should be trying to shove everyone back into the closet. I think that side B is a beautiful movement, and I deeply respect it, because people being open about what they struggle with, I think, is a good thing, and it's really the only way that people can grow. And so, that's kind of where I stand on that. I tend to be fairly live and let live on that topic. But I got into the Solidarity Party. As I said, I was a pro-life Democrat, and I was involved in political work, union organizing, worked for Greenpeace, worked for actually the Indiana Democratic Party, which made me even more disillusioned with the Democratic Party than I already was, having supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. When Bernie didn't win in 2020, I was kind of done. And really mostly because of the issues where the Democrats were to my right, not so much the issues where I was to their right. And I didn't know that there was an option for me to be both of those things out there as a party. So my typical go-to was the Green Party. My first vote for president was for Ralph Nader in the year 2000. And my dad, who is a vote blue no matter who Democrat, was really upset with me when he found that out. And I was only 18, so I didn't know what I didn't know, and kind of went along with his very emotional arguments against that. But nowadays, I look back on that as kind of a harbinger of things to come. But I voted for Jill Stein in 2016. I was not as impressed with Howie Hawkins, who was the Green Party's nominee in 2020. And so, I was looking for another option, and thank God I was, because that's when I found not just a choice for president in Brian Carroll, who ran in 2020 for our party, but also a party that I loved. And, even the name drew me in, the Solidarity name, with my background in union politics.
And I was just thinking, so like American Solidarity Party, maybe you can speak to a little bit more of that name, and if it's been, I grew up in even though I grew up Mennonite, it was still influenced by a lot of conservative politics that assumed that like to be a good Christian was to be a Republican. I knew there was Democrats at our church. I just was like, they're not as good. And has the American Solidarity Party, I've voted for it as well. Maybe TJ's the one who told me about
probably
them.
Did.
And I was like, oh, this is really great. Like, why, I wish this was more of a thing. Has it been successful at creating solidarity across this bipartisan world that we're still kind of plagued by?
Yeah. I think it has in the places where we're actually known. Like, most people don't even know we exist. But I will say that, prior to becoming a Solidarity Party, person, I had mixed conversations in churches. I was a Democrat, and so I would often say that my Christian friends would sometimes question my faith over my politics, and my political friends would question my sanity over my faith. But if I was just talking politics, you'd probably think I was the most left-wing Democrat you'd ever heard, or maybe, Green Party person, whatever. Because prior to finding out about our party, I did identify as a socialist, Democratic, and then libertarian, anarchist kind of socialist. And then I found out about Distributism, which is our platform, which we can maybe talk about a little bit. That's kind of where I stood on it. And so if you were talking about those issues with me, you'd think I was super left. And then if you asked me about abortion, you'd think I was like the most right-wing person you'd ever met. And certainly if you talk to me about theology alone, I'm super theologically conservative. I'm like a young earth creationist. I'm believe in wholeheartedly in the divine inspiration of the Word of God. So I am down the line theologically conservative. So it just depends on what you're talking to me about. But yeah, that was the sort of perception. Now, I will say about the Solidarity Party that there were a couple reasons why initially the party was named the Christian Democratic Party USA. I believe it was the full name. It was founded by a few folks who are sort of more academic people and knew about Christian democracy as a movement in Europe and in South America. It never really existed until our party was founded here in America. There are some Democrats and Republicans, both throughout history and right now, that sort of kind of have similar ideas, but it was never like a party, for various reasons. But we do exist now. We never wanted there to be a thing where if you join our party, like you have to be a Christian and people think that you have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a Christian. You just have to, number one, be able to check the box honestly that says that you agree with our affirmation statement, which is, really short. It's even shorter than our principles, but we have 7 principles. And you can find those at solidarity-party.org. And then we have a platform. The platform delves into more depth on how to implement the 7 principles. But that platform changes over time. And the platform is a consensus document. There are very few people in our party who agree with every single point in the platform. And I would be surprised, if there were anyone who honestly could say that they agree with every single word of it. Maybe there's somebody out there, but that's not a big deal to me. And, I feel like the principles are the main point. Certainly the affirmation statement is even shorter than that. And there are people that maybe disagree here and there with the principles even. I think still have a place in the party, but the principles are the main thing. It's sanctity of life, social justice, community-oriented society, centrality of the family, economic security, care for the environment, and peace and international solidarity. And so we are, like I said, to the left on many issues, and to the right on many others. So we don't get pigeonholed easily, but we do have atheists and agnostics who are members of our party. We have Jews and Muslims who are members of our party, and I would like to see that continue. But the largest plurality are Christians, and probably always will be.
Yeah.
That name Solidarity was an homage to Lech Walesa, who was a Polish trade unionist, anti-communist guy, but as you would imagine, also had critiques of traditional laissez-faire capitalism, and that's where our party stands. We take a third way position between. Not really between. It's a completely different position. It is that we believe in worker cooperatives, and we believe in pro-labor, rights and union rights and those kinds of things. And so we push for that. We push for, making sure that as many people as possible have access to productive capital, and own their home and, can live free of needing to go out and rent themselves on the open market. They have some ownership over the work that they're doing and the labor value that they're putting into it. But that's kind of where we stand on economics, and
that's what you'd call distributism.
It's distributism. Yeah. It's a weird word. Some people on the right don't like that word because they think, oh, it's redistribution. It's not redistribution. It's distribution. It's distributing economic resources in a more just, more equitable way from the beginning. I don't personally have a problem with progressive tax structure. But some people do, and just, to point out that there are sort of different versions of distributism, and I tend to emphasize the sort of anti-capitalist aspect of distributism, to the degree that some folks don't on the more conservative big L libertarian side get a little bit
and could you
feel in their feels.
Could you describe, when you say anti-capitalist, what are the things that you're anti? Because it's just so many people I know, they hear anti-capitalist and they assume that means, even with everything you've just described, it still rings, oh, he's pro like dictator communism or something.
Right. So, just as a point of my own personal bio, I was never a Stalinist. I was never a Maoist. I was never anything like that. I know people like that. I probably in our party know more people like that than the average person in our party, or the average, theologically conservative person in the country. But that was never my thing. But there is a difference. So in traditional sort of Marxist strains of socialism, you're talking about the dictatorship of the proletariat. You're talking about actually the state running enterprises by and large. And that doesn't actually change the capitalist business model. That's state-run capitalism. And so instead of a boss, you've got a bureaucrat. And what you need is to change the business model. The business model is the problem. The business model is what concentrates power and wealth, either in the hands of a small number of people who have capital, and then use the government in ways that are sometimes termed crony capitalism to get benefits for themselves and to weight the market in their favor, or the government just takes it over directly. And those are sort of the two ways in which the state becomes in service of this concentration of wealth and power. And so what we want is a wider distribution of wealth and power at the bottom. We are very localist, and we believe in local power, in local communities having control over their own economic life. Now, the thing that we also believe in is democracy. We are small d Christian Democrats. We believe in the democratic process. And many people who think that they love democracy, they say they love democracy, but traditional democracy, liberal democracy, supports capitalism. Capitalism concentrates wealth and therefore concentrates power. That's anti-democratic. And it has an anti-democratic effect to the point where basically corporations now own our government in many respects. So what we want in our party, and what I would like to see, writ large in society, is actual economic democracy, where more people have access. G.K. Chesterton was a distributist. G.K. Chesterton said that the biggest problem with capitalism is that there aren't enough capitalists. The average person gets shut out of that system. So you don't really have a choice in the market. It's not really a free market, because my choices, if I have to rent myself on the labor market, is I either rent myself to a traditional capitalist enterprise or I starve. Those are not real choices. So what we want is the ability for regular people to get out there in the market and have productive capital, have, their own home, have some control over their own business, what they're doing. This is not a theory, mind you. This exists in the world. You've probably shopped at a cooperative. You didn't even realize it, maybe. But also in some other countries, they incentivize this in the marketplace, which I am in favor of, doing things like in Italy, they have the Marcora law, where if you're unemployed and you can get together with 9 other unemployed people or more, you can get your entire unemployment allotment as a lump sum business loan on the condition that you start a cooperative with that money. And so in Emilia-Romagna, for example, about a third of their GDP is cooperative enterprises. people love working at these places, by the way. They love it.
We have in
yeah.
my part of the city, I can think of like 2 cooperative grocery stores, 2 cooperative cafes, one that just was able to purchase its own building, and so now actually like owns that and can hold that so that the workers are the people who are running it.
Exactly.
And I'm talking with some other neighbors about potentially starting another cooperative cafe.
Yeah, I
which would
love
be really
it.
sweet.
Well,
And
yeah,
I was
go
going to say,
ahead.
for listeners who are interested, we interviewed Joseph Pierce on Economics for Local Community about this distributivism, or he just calls it localism, on episode 38, if anyone's interested in that. Are you familiar with Joseph Pierce at all, Mike?
I am. So a couple other people that I'll point out to folks. One of the original texts on this subject, which he may have mentioned, is The Servile State by Hilaire Belloc. And that was popularized by G.K. Chesterton in many of his writings. And then a modern person that has written on this subject is John Maedai. John is in Texas, Medaille, Maedai. And John was a advisor on our advisory board for our party. John wrote a book called Toward a Truly Free Market. And John talks on this subject. If you look him up on YouTube, you can find tons of talks that he's given on the subject. But it's a great book, and I highly recommend it. But yeah, so that's sort of our economics. Now, on the topic of our social issues, on life issues, we are down the line 100% pro-life, the most pro-life party I've ever seen. Consistent life ethic as well. We believe in, sometimes called pro-life from womb to tomb, or whole life values, consistent life ethic, all of that. So, we are in favor of a holistic effort to, for example, make abortion not just banned or illegal, or but to make it unthinkable, make it that it wouldn't even be a choice that you would want to make, because life is the easiest choice to make, and we make life a very difficult choice to make for women and for families, economically and socially, and so we need to change that. And our party, I think our platform goes a long way. Our economic platform, our social justice platform, goes a long way toward fixing that issue as much as possible. So that's kind of where we stand on life issues. Now, where we stand on LGBTQ issues depends on who you ask. Now, officially in the platform, we stand for...
It says natural family, found on the marriage of one man and one woman is a fundamental unit. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And I believe in that.
We do too, actually.
I will say
we
at the
also
outset,
do. So.
I believe in that.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, how you work that out in
That's
politics,
the question.
It differs person to person. And so, I'm not going to say that my views on that are the only way to be, and the only way to represent our principles faithfully. There are different ways that people do that. Even people that mostly agree with me on the topic have differences of opinion on how to work that out in society. But I tend to be a civic pluralist, and I tend to believe in democratic rights and rights in the economy. And I don't want to see people, there was a recent thing that Donald Trump did, for example, where he was cutting funding for the suicide hotline for LGBTQ youth. So that's terrible.
Yes.
That's just awful. Now you could make an argument that maybe like the ways in which those therapies, traditional therapies that might be offered, are essentially affirming LGBTQ identity, and we could say that that's not a good thing. I would say, and I have said, that probably LGBTQ youth in crisis are not going to be seeking out non-affirming therapies, and if somebody commits suicide, you can't help them. afterward with that. They're not going to be listening to New Kinship afterwards. So that's kind of where I stand on it. I believe in making sure that people are flourishing in the marketplace, and so they anti-discrimination stuff, and there are various things that I believe on that topic that differ from where our platform stands, which is overturning a Obergefell. There's nothing in our platform right now on anti-discrimination specifically in public accommodation for LGBTQ people. Whereas there used to be, when I first, there was, when I first started in the party, there were some things in there that are similar, if you're familiar at all to, the Fairness for All Act, which is, supported by groups like the AND campaign, which I am involved with, that essentially talk about anti-discrimination in public accommodations, like restaurants and employment and housing, but also are making sure that we're not like putting the Sisters of the Poor out of business by sending lawsuits against them for not hiring people that don't espouse their values. So that used to be in our platform. There's a very old blog post that you can find some places from a member who was involved at that time. Called his name is Matt Bartko. Matt is a friend of mine who wrote a piece on the ways in which we should be as a party, and we are in the platform welcoming of LGBTQ people. But some of what he writes in there is sort of a dead letter because it's talking about things that were in the platform that aren't in the platform anymore.
I think there's a lot to unpack here. I'm curious why did that shift? Why were those parts of the platform removed? And also, as we talked about, what sort of tensions are these LGBTQ topics currently in contemporary American Solidarity Party circles? What are they producing? And what are the circles that are the factions that are developing around this topic?
So, I talk about this in terms of three camps. And just to give folks some background, party members do have a variety of positions on the LGBTQ issue. The party platform has gotten progressively less nuanced during my time in the party. But I do tend to think that you can broadly categorize the membership into three camps. There's obvious nuance between individuals in those camps. But in camp one, I sort of put socially conservative people who are live and let live on the issue. They take a political position on that is that they would likely favor something along the lines of the Fairness for All Act that is in Utah. It is in law in Utah, and there was a proposal for that at the federal level. Some of us and I tend to go along with this myself. Would want to get the federal government out of the marriage business and state governments out of the marriage business altogether, and give everyone civil unions, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. But that's not universal in Camp One. But in any event, these folks likely are quite theologically conservative like me on the matter. And we have some people who are in the party who are side B, who are in this camp. It's not my background, and it's certainly not my place to, out them, so to speak, but they know that I'm a safe person, and they have confided in me that is the case. But folks in Camp One, may be theologically conservative, but we don't feel like we're trying to build a church. We've already got one. And so we're trying to build a political party, and some people in the country may not even agree with Camp One. They may agree with Camp Three, 3, 2, whatever. But we want to have a place where everyone can come together. Now, Camp Two that I mentioned there is what I would categorize pro-life people who are socially liberal, on the LGBTQ issue. This would include people who are themselves LGBTQ, but it does also include allies. And this group would probably be more comfortable in something like a pro-life Green Party, but that doesn't exist. And they are strongly pro-life. And so they do gravitate more toward us. And then
so that's where they would actually
go ahead.
disagree with the platform note. Because,
So they would be
in that the platform notes.
There would be side A in our language. There's side A. They have side A theology.
Yes.
For this second group. Yeah.
Yes.
So they don't think that natural family, the marriage of one man and one woman, is the thing to support in a political party. Yeah. So
they don't. Now, because of my background in leftist circles, I probably know and have done more work to try to bring these kind of folks into our party. And I think it would be good for them to come into our party, not to change the party, because I disagree with them too. And I don't want that to be the position of the platform. But I think that they are a group in the country that exists. And I think that it would be good for them to be around Camp 1 and Camp 3 people, honestly, if the Camp 3 folks were less stridently culture warrior. And I'll describe where I would see Camp 3, and that is socially conservative people who would like the party and the country to take a sort of hard right culture warrior stance politically on LGBTQ issues. And there may be Camp 3 people. I know Camp 3 people who are less strident about it and aren't jerks about it, so to speak. But there are people in Camp 3 who treat people, even in Camp 1, let alone Camp 2, like garbage. And, very toxic spaces sometimes in our online discourse on this, which is sad to me, and not where we should be as a party. Now, I will say, I think most people in the party turn up their nose at that, but many people don't know whether, because we haven't really had a lot of people involved in active leadership, and because the platform has gotten progressively more toward Camp 3. I think there are a lot of people in Camp 1, and I know this for a fact, doing organizing, that won't join our party because of where the platform stands on this issue. And there have been people that have left, let alone Camp 2.
Can I ask, so I'm looking here at that platform on marriage and family, and I'll just read one bullet point. It says, "We call for the repeal of laws and reversal of decisions which define marriage as anything other than the exclusive union of one man and one woman for life, including those that allow for polygamy, no-fault divorce, or same-sex marriage." Side note, I just love that it's the consistency and integrity there. It finishes out, "We call for the law to make it easier for household members with or without a romantic relationship to be included in healthcare plans and ease the burdens of transferring assets and ownership of property." Is that, do Camp 3 people, more culture warrior, do they find themselves like that they don't like that last part of that platform statement?
We don't talk a lot about that, to be honest with you, in our circles. There are aspects of that, and even earlier language that talks about families of all kinds, that I don't think is still in the platform. It was like a transition period between the first platform that we had when I joined and this platform. That language is generic enough that some people in Camp 3 have interpreted it narrowly to exclude certain types of family arrangements and marriage arrangements and romantic arrangements. So, that's what I would say about that. Now, I will say as well that there is a particular person in Camp 3 who is in state leadership and has been in the past in national leadership, who I know has said, privately at least, that he keeps his folks in line when they disagree on other issues by burning pride flags, rhetorically, so to speak. And I don't think that's a good kind of sense, to take, to try to rhetorically, kick LGBTQ people down a flight of stairs. And again, people that show up in our spaces sometimes, I recruited a young side A trans person, who I didn't even know she identified as trans. She was passing to me, but in any event, repeatedly dead naming someone, so-called misgendering, which again, like I struggle with as a person who believes in the traditional Christian sexual ethic. The way I tend to deal with it is I just use people's names a lot more than pronouns, but it, repeatedly pestering someone to the point of them feeling like they need to leave the party just for their own sanity. And this happens. I've had people in Camp One who I love, who have just left because they're sick. People who are more conservative than me even have left because they're just sick of this kind of behavior in our social spaces. And again, I don't want to make it seem like this is like, these are like a small group of very vocal people who have an outsized influence because other people who have a different perspective haven't joined and won't join. And I tell them, we're a small party. You're talking like, you could get your audience, joining the party would shift, the conversation on this topic, just your audience alone. Now, I will say, I am of the view that the party would be better served if the first camp sort of became our fulcrum, because it does reflect, in my mind, a reasonable compromise between the two sides. There are, of course, people, in the second camp and the third camp who wouldn't be happy, with that compromise. But at the moment, the platform is essentially Camp 3, and most people in the country who are in Camp 3 are just not where we are on economics and healthcare and environmental policy and peace and justice issues. So the longer we remain in Camp 3, particularly with like ideological shifts toward Camp 1 and even Camp 2 in the GOP electorate, let alone like the Democratic Party electorate, the more likely we're going to see party drift to the right on every non-social issue. And that is part of why I founded the Liberation Caucus, which we can sort of talk about as well.
I just want to read a few other bullet points from this family, because for listeners who are unfamiliar, recommend just pulling up their website, reading through or skimming through. But under the marriage and family, so you're like, okay, it's this conservative view on marriage and family, but then like we call for pro-family policies such as direct cash payments to families in proportion to the number of children they have, and a cash subsidy paid to stay-at-home caregivers. We must support the same benefits for extended families and households based on the number of elderly and disabled persons they care for as primary caregivers. That type of like, hey, we want to make it work for families of different shapes and sizes, of different caregiver situations to actually make work is very in my experience, traditional right-wing family policies of just like, well, you just better pull yourself up by your bootstraps as one man and one woman, and just pretend it's going to work out. So I just appreciate whether it's just the holding all these things together that we don't normally see together. The next bullet point is we call for governments to fund the expansion of shelters for victims of domestic violence and neglect.
And I love our family plank. I love it. I think honestly, like there would be ways that you could even personally, I would like to see us like trim out certain parts of that plank that I think are not in keeping with my views on Camp 1. But even if you left it as is and you just added in language, on supporting people in the ways that the Fairness for All Act does, and making sure that we are being caring and attentive to the fact that LGBTQ people face higher, rates of homelessness and suicide, and that we care about that, which basically all of us do, and call that out in the platform, I think that there would be people in Camp 1 and Camp 2 who would be willing to accept that. But when we have only the sort of hard stance on the Camp 3 stuff, then it becomes a problem for many people to even want to join, even though they agree with us on every other topic. Sometimes more than some of the conservative folks, who are coming in to the party from Camp 3, agree with us. And that's exactly what I'm talking about of as people join, more from Camp 3, it solidifies that sort of party drift possibility on all of the other topics where, we are to the left.
Understood.
We have a little over 10 minutes left. So there's the Liberation Caucus, and then we also at the beginning just touched on, what are our like political theologies, whether it's more Anabaptist or more like kingdom of God influencing politics. I guess leave it to you, Mike, of where you would love to jump in on a little bit between those two things or anything else.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do want to mention the Liberation Caucus because we did mention it briefly. I mentioned it briefly. The Liberation Caucus is essentially the party's leftist caucus. Now, there are many people in our party because of various commitments on issues. They don't like calling themselves leftists, and I don't really care about that. And there are people in the Liberation Caucus who are distributists. There are people in the Liberation Caucus who identify as socialist. And I don't care about that either. I'm ism neutral. I just care about, that you agree with the party's principles. But we have never taken a stance on LGBTQ issues. We are formally neutral on that, and we will always remain formally neutral. And the reason for that is that I wanted to be able to bring people in who disagree with me on the topic, either in Camp 3 or Camp 1, or Camp 2. And so I didn't care as much about that. And, so I would recruit people. Well, this became a thing of like, okay, well, you're recruiting these Camp 2 people, so you're secretly Camp 2. Or, Camp 1 has had a target on our backs because we're not Camp 3. So, and there were some folks that are in Camp 2 who joined through the Liberation Caucus, who started an LGBTQ caucus. And again, this is side A, folks. If you track this, I'm sorry, Camp 3, side A, side B. But in any event, these are mostly side A folks who joined our party. And I encouraged anyone, if you're Camp 1, if you're Camp 2, and you're Camp 3 in the Liberation Caucus, join together with other people and lobby and be active in the party for your cause. But the Liberation Caucus the attempt is to not really change what the party stands for. It's really to solidify where the party already stands to the left on issues and trying to be a counterbalance to the potential for party drift. As we bring in maybe more conservative people, there would be a counterbalance. I feel like there is that counterbalance in the Christian democratic parties in South America because of the influence of liberation theology there, versus in Europe, where the primary threat was communism, and so they sort of lost their zeal on the anti-capitalist end of things. We have former Republicans in our party who are to the left of Angela Merkel, for example, who's CDU party in Germany. So that's kind of where that came from. Now, I mean, a political theology, like I have never been, a theocrat. I have never been a dominionist. That's the sort of integralist, if you're familiar with that term in Catholicism, dominionism, Christian nationalism, whatever you want to call it. There are some ways that I feel like Christian nationalism has been disingenuously used by social liberals to paint everyone, including people in our party, as Christian nationalists. I believe in civic pluralism. And I think that the best way to go about that is for everyone to come together and make democratic decisions. And that may end up meaning that my decision, my choice is not the one that wins out. But I also believe in contending for Christian, traditional Christian social teachings on these topics. And I don't shy away from the fact that I believe those things because I'm a Christian. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So, you know, I do believe in freedom of religion and in the centrality of religion in my own background and my own, you know, faith politically. And so that's one of the reasons why all the frustrations that I'm talking about with the Solidarity Party, they are frustrations for real. But the Solidarity Party is beautiful, and I want to see it continue to grow and flourish. And I want there to be harmony between those three camps and us to work together on the issues where we find common ground. Because I believe that we have harmed our public witness as Christians in the ways in which we have been tribally partisan as Republicans or Democrats, and you know, have been Republicans or Democrats first and Christians second. And we wouldn't talk about it that way, but that's how we act. We don't espouse traditional Christian teachings on a variety of topics because that's not popular in our political party. And so that's where my sort of political theology stands on these topics.
I love the civic pluralism where it's like, yeah, different people get to contend for what they actually think will serve the world well based off of all their values and beliefs. And I would love to see more Christians voting for increased access to cooperatives based upon their deep religious convictions that the Lord has made us for friendship and meaningful economic engagement.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'll send out a final pitch here. Please join our party. You know, whatever your views are on these issues, head to solidarity-party.org. $1 makes you a voting member today. As long as you do it, you know, I don't know when this is going to air, but as long as you do it before you get to vote in our upcoming election or even run, please, anyone, you know, there's a lot of great stuff going on in the Solidarity Party. So I'd love to see more folks join it.
Definitely. Yeah, it's good. I hope, I hope to be more involved in the future. So I'm glad you could come on. And yeah, we'll keep connecting to others. It's also exposed for Side B as a movement. We should think more about, maybe more cohesively, how we think society should work in each context we're in. A lot of us are in the U.S., so we should think about what that means for, what is the Side B vision for these LGBT topics in the U.S.? What does it look like? How does that relate to how we think marriage should be? And again, we admit our movement is diverse because we have different theological traditions in it. So is there some way we can come cohesively together towards having some sort of idea? For example, that could be, say, marriage between man and a woman, but then also anyone should have access to civil unions, right? That could be one way of making some sort of political ideal. Or the political ideal could be, as you mentioned, get a secular government out of marriage, make everything civil unions, and then people can choose to be married in a church or a synagogue or whatever if they would want to. That could be another potential way of kind of putting the pieces together.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by, I think that rings of a little bit of C.S. Lewis's desire to I think C.S. Lewis tried to maybe say there's a civil marriage and then there's like a religious marriage. And I like your take a little bit better, Mike, of like, don't try to double define a word. Let's just civilly use civil unions and recognize that isn't marriage, that marriage actually does come from a specific meaning and history and is saying something more specific. And I feel like that would be a lot more clear and hope to build up different ways that people want to. Yeah, I even think about just like, two biological sisters living together. There could be reasons that they would have a civil union because they've been living together in the same household for the past 30 years.
Also because in the U.S.
And they want to be able to visit each other at the hospital.
Also because in the U.S.
and, all of that.
health funding is often tied to marriage and marriage partnerships, because we don't have universal like health care, basically.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why in the U.S.
one sister has a good health insurance from their company, and the other sister, works at a small nonprofit. It's like, it would be nice if they could share health insurance. They're sharing everything else. That would be
our party would deal with that with universal coverage, but
agreed.
For sure, like there are lots of ways that you could deal with that, and that is definitely one of them. Also, being able to sort of separate in your mind that whatever your views are on marriage, people should have, in the marketplace, the ability to go out and, feel that they're not being discriminated against, in their employment or what have you, because of their status on identitarian
That's part of the
issues.
reason.
And I think that
part of the reason why we struggle with Camp 3 so much, because Side B agrees formally with their definition of marriage. They, in my experience, they'll even start discriminating against us, Side B people, who, even though we follow a similar sexual ethic, because we're still too impure for them, because we're queer, LGBT, whatever. I mean, like for them, it just keeps if you're tainted by it at all, you're bad.
Yeah. And you don't even have to use any of the letters in the acronym.
You don't.
It's just like, if you're not calling yourself straight, and it moves from, we're just saying we have a theological agreement largely, but they are not only like discriminating inside their religious sphere, but it breeds a culture of discrimination and a culture war, as you spoke. And that's what I just find so dangerous, that we are, I don't know if we can say it's a spiritual immaturity to not realize that when you base a community around dynamics of fear, dynamics of warfare, instead of what I think what I've been drawn to it before, is this like solidarity of what we're for, what we love, what we're trying to protect and care for and grow. Like those are just two very different spiritual environments, and we see our country just being, I think, largely taken over by what we're against, what we're afraid of. And that. Go ahead.
My pastor Chris Butler had a piece of a sermon that he recently preached, where he said, about sort of culture warriors, that you don't want to see people change. You just want to get it out of your face. And so again, it's like you would rather just shove everyone back in a closet, and, you don't, formally, like, you may disagree with this, but essentially in culture, you don't want to see it. You don't want to see that people are doing. So that is where I think the disconnect comes between people who agree with each other on the traditional Christian sexual ethic, but you're not calling yourself straight, and you're willing to associate with people that they don't like, and you want to, and so it's too in your face, and they don't like that, and I don't want to see the degradation and the vulgarness in our culture either, but I believe in civic pluralism, and I think that the best way to actually bring that change about is to know that it exists and to confront it, but to do that in a loving way, and to realize that there's a difference between that kind of activity and political party building and political activity, where you might bring someone in who disagrees with you on a topic.
Yeah, there's a lot to say.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Mike, for joining. I wish you and the American Solidarity the best. If we had another episode, I'd maybe be interested in just hearing, your aspirations for breaking out of our two-party system and how what the actual prospects are of third parties, bearing more weight on the either state or federal level. But I really, I hope that both to the death of a bipartisan politics, but also just that the caucusing and the formation work that's actually happening in these communities themselves, I think, have transformative opportunities for us as Americans about how we think about politics and how we're trying to invest in our communities. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Friends, I want to tell you about Revoice Conference this summer. And yes, if we haven't met yet, maybe we're not quite friends yet, but I assume if you come to Revoice, then we will meet, and then we can be friends. I have had the joy of being at every Revoice conference, so this is an easy plug for me to invite you into. If you haven't been, or if you've been before, come out to Seattle early July 9th through 12th, and join for a few days of just lovely time together, worship, listening to great speakers, going out to different breakout workshops on not just fascinating, but just, important topics that become really practical, whether you yourself are just trying to figure out, how do I live a flourishing life with God in the midst of my sexuality? Or you want to know, how can I be a good friend, a good partner in a church, and support the queer SSA community? We have a really terrific lineup of speakers. Dr. Wesley Hill is returning, arts speaking. Our friend Mwendia, who we've interviewed before, is also coming across the ocean to join us. Julia Sadusky, who I would love to get on our podcast at some point. And I'm really excited. If you haven't registered, check out the link in the show notes and do what you can to make it out there. Bring a friend with you, or if you really can't come there physically, there are some online registration options as well. I know people have appreciated, and they're looking to make those engaging. In fact, Elaine and I will be doing a panel on the stage that will be live streamed around community living, and TJ will be doing a not live streamed panel on Kinship 101, how to actually think about all the different ways that we build kinship. So Lord willing, it'd be great to see you there.